How do you actually build a portfolio that pays you every single month? Getting monthly income outside of a salary can be tricky. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through how to build a monthly paying portfolio from scratch. I'll show you a couple of examples and help you to understand the thinking behind it so you can put your own together if you feel it suits your goals. I do think people have this slightly romantic idea about dividends, like it's just this income tap they can turn on when they want. But if you don't look for the right qualities in a company or a fund, you can make some really bad financial mistakes. And the reason a monthly dividend strategy is popular is because it's likely what you've been used to. For most of our lives, we're used to getting paid monthly through a salary, as well as general spending habits, whether it's subscriptions or a credit card. But the problem with dividends is that most companies will pay out quarterly, some just twice a year. This isn't the end of the world, it's really just a cash flow problem. When you receive a dividend, you have to spread it across the next 3 months. The main adjustment is that you might need to hold a bit more back as a buffer, due to the gap until the next one comes in. So building a monthly paying portfolio isn't some magic strategy. It's just about making the income line up more naturally with how you actually spend, which for a lot of people just makes things easier to manage. So how do you do it? Most dividend funds will pay quarterly, so if you hold 3 of them on offset cycles, you can cover all 12 months. One pays January, April, July, October, the next pays February, May, August, November, the third pays March, June, September, December. Stack them up and you've got something that pays every month. It's not just about finding funds with offset months though. You don't want to sacrifice quality just to meet frequency criteria. It also makes things a lot simpler if they also have similar yields. The biggest things I'd look at when choosing would be, what's the fund actually trying to do? If it's passive, what's it tracking and how is that index built? Yield I treat as a sanity check more than anything, because under 2%, you can barely call it a dividend fund, and over 6%, I'd want to know what's been sacrificed to get there. Dividend growth is a big one if you're living off it, because you want those payments increasing over time, ideally covering inflation. The payout ratio is useful to check the sustainability of a dividend. It tells you what percentage of earnings are being paid out. Sometimes companies will pay out more in dividends than they earn because they want to retain or attract investors. So you don't want too many of these companies in a fund. And then concentration. So make sure you're comfortable with the exposure by region, sector, and top holdings. Cost comes into it too, but for me, that's near the bottom of the list, as long as it's not crazy expensive. Finding funds with offset months does take a bit of digging, because funds have to pay out when the underlying companies pay. And if a lot of the funds hold the same companies, they'll tend to have the same payout schedule. But here's a couple of examples to give you an idea. One using ETFs and one using investment trusts. You can of course mix and match too if they align. For the ETFs, the first is the WisdomTree Europe Equity Income Fund with the ticker EEI. It's a regional tilt towards European companies, and the key feature of this ETF is that it's fundamentally weighted. This means instead of the market dictating a company's weight in the index, fundamental metrics are used such as revenue, earnings, book value, cash flow, and dividends. The aim is to provide more stable and value-orientated investment returns. It has an ongoing charge of 0.29%, a current dividend yield of 4.57%, and pays out in January, April, July, and October. Then we've got the SPDR S&P Global Dividend Aristocrats Fund with the ticker GBDV. What makes it stand out is the index construction. The screening criteria is much stricter than most dividend ETFs. Companies need to have increased their dividend for 10 consecutive years, have a payout ratio below 100%, a yield of less than 10%, and a market cap of at least $1 billion. It has an ongoing charge of 0.45%, a current dividend yield of 3.93%, and pays out in February, May, August, and November. The third ETF is the VanEck Morningstar Developed Markets Dividend Leaders Fund with the ticker TDGB. As the name suggests, it focuses on developed markets, but more specifically on companies that have displayed consistency and sustainability with their dividend payments. It has an ongoing charge of 0.38%, a current dividend yield of 3.34%, and pays out in March, June, September, and December. Across these 3 ETFs, you've got reasonable diversification, but you will get a small amount of overlap in some companies, as you can see from the top 10 holdings. All fairly close in dividend yields too, and that's especially important if you want somewhat similar payments each month. Europe is a bit higher than the other 2, but you may also decide to have slightly less in this fund, as the other 2 are more globally diversified. Now on to the investment trusts, and in a lot of ways, these can be superior for dividends compared to ETFs. One of the big advantages they have is that due to being actively managed, they can utilize a revenue reserve. This is where they can hold back up to 15% of revenue in the good years to then pay out in the bad years, which helps to provide smooth income, something that's very desirable if you're living off the income. ETFs can't do this. They have to pass on whatever comes in whenever it comes in. So here's the three trusts. The first has to be the City of London Investment Trust with the ticker CTY. I would put this in virtually any dividend portfolio. The thing that sets it apart is the track record. 59 years of consecutive dividend increases, right to the top of the dividend heroes list. And it does that with one of the lowest ongoing charges at 0.36%. It has a current dividend yield of 3.97% and pays out in February, May, August and November. Then we've got the Henderson High Income Trust with the ticker HHI. It focuses on paying a slightly higher yield through a selection of both large cap and smaller companies. It has 13 years of consecutive dividend growth, and it can also hold up to 20% in bonds. Its ongoing charge is quite a bit more expensive at 0.68%, but it does have a current dividend yield of 5.52%, and it pays out in January, April, July, and October. The third one is the Merchants Trust with the ticker MRCH. This trust has grown its dividend for 44 consecutive years and focuses on higher yielding large UK companies. It has an ongoing charge of 0.54%, a current dividend yield of 4.7%, and pays out in March, June, September, and December. Put those together, and again, you've got income every month. But with the trust, the income will be a lot smoother. One thing to note with the trust though, is that they are all in the UK equity income sector. UK large caps are very globally diversified, so it's not quite the same as being 100% exposed to one country. But if you wanted more geographical spread, you can always mix in one of the ETFs. For me, these funds tick a lot of boxes, but they are just examples. When you're putting together a portfolio yourself, create a shortlist first of around 5 to 10 funds that meet your main criteria. Then you can look at when they pay out and see if they line up. You can take this a lot further if you really want to, but I wouldn't recommend it. In theory, you can do it with individual companies instead of funds. You actually just need 3 quarterly paying companies in offset months. But of course, you'd then be extremely concentrated. So you'd want more. And the more you add, the more you're juggling the timing and the payment sizes to stop your monthly income swinging all over the place. Plus all the research and the monitoring. It's so much more work than a few funds and just a headache you don't need. I did undertake an experiment like this myself. On Trading 212, I created a weekly dividend pie that focuses on dividend sustainability. It contains 50 stocks with a dividend payment every week. I started with a short list of over 600 stocks, ranking them on things like balance sheet health, cash flow, and dividend growth. It was a serious amount of work to put together, which is exactly why, for most people, a handful of well-chosen funds is the way to go. So who's this actually for? Essentially anyone who wants regular, sustainable income. If you're retired or bridging a gap, maybe you've stopped work but can't access your pension yet, or you can access your private pension, but the state pension's still a few years off. This kind of steady income fills that gap nicely, and it works best in an ISA for the obvious tax reasons. Who it's not for is anyone still accumulating with a long time horizon. If you're in your 20s or 30s and decades from needing this, the month a dividend is received is irrelevant. You're after total return, and chasing monthly income just adds on complexity for no real payoff. And if you're more focused on total return than income, you might find my free ETF cheat sheet a useful starting point. It's a quick reference of low-cost diversified funds across the main regions and sectors, picked on the same sort of quality criteria we went through earlier. You can download it using the link in the description. Otherwise, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next one.